All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 2024 Argo CD and Rollouts Community Meeting. I'm your host today, Jesse, maintainer of the Argo project. And if you haven't already, please add yourself to the attendee list. And if you have any topics, agenda items, issues you'd like to discuss, you can also comment on the doc. Just a reminder that the Argo project adheres to the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be courteous and respectful to each other during this meeting. And a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube after. Okay, today's agenda, we just have, we had Argo CD released version 2.12 yesterday. And Michael will be giving a brief rundown on what you can expect in this release.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me share. So first thing I'll point folks to is this blog post. I'm going to show a few of the features and improvements that are like easy to show, but there's some things that like you kind of just have to read and think about. So if you want to skim this while I go over some of the more visual changes, and if you have questions about any of these features, I'd love to cover them. I also picked a couple things that are queued up for 2.13. The RCs have been out for about a month and a half now, so we've been busy merging stuff for 2.13, and I want to give you all a sense for what's coming up there. So starting with stuff that's in 2.12, one of the biggest features is that we now have a full UI for multi-source applications. In the past, there would be notifications in the UI that basically say this isn't supported for multi-source yet. But now, if you have a multi-source app like this one, I've got a couple things in there, and you go to the sources tab, it will list all the sources for you. And it's got an edit interface. So I can pop in here and say, well, I only want this replicate count to be 1 in my application. Pop back out here and you can see that was reflected in the app. So that's a huge step forward for multi-source. You can also see a few places where like we have indications that where it used to just say, sorry, we can't tell you anything else about this app. We actually explain that in a bit more depth. So multi-sources, I think, still technically marked as a beta feature, but I think we're really on the cusp of being able to call it stable and a fully supported feature. So that's number one. And if y'all want to add questions in chat, if you have any, I'll come back to them after I go through these. The second thing I wanted to show off is a feature in how Argo CD evaluates RBAC. So it used to be that if you granted a user the ability to delete resources, they could delete the application, they could delete any resource in the application. And we've got a new feature that allows you to say, okay, I only want, say, the test user to have the ability to delete pods and not every single resource. So I've synced this config map. I'm going to pop into the test user. Grab the password and show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go back into this app and say, if I want to delete a pod, I can do that. I can cycle that pod. But if I go to delete the replica set, it's going to tell me that the permission is denied. This is really, really handy for, honestly, mostly the delete pod use case. I know that at Intuit, we have folks who, like, they have an application that they know has memory consumption issues. So they'll want to go in and manually restart a pod to bring the memory use down. It's not necessarily always best Kubernetes practice, but practically speaking, it is very nice to have the ability to allow users to do some things manually, but prevent them from doing others. So those are the two big features in 2.12 I wanted to highlight. We've got a ton others, but as I say, a lot of them are sort of behind the scenes. We've got some performance improvements specifically that I'm very excited about. For example, avoiding doing get ls remote if we've already got Git revisions and we've got them cached. So glance through that list, see what looks exciting to you. It's a pretty big release. For a couple things that we're looking at in 2.13, one that I'm particularly excited about is a little better integration with Flux. I know that a lot of folks like to have Argo CD as their GitOps operator for some things and Flux for others. Someone added a health check. So now if your Helm release is unhealthy, not syncing for some reason, you're going to get the usual little red broken heart that you get for other Argo resources. And they also added custom actions for common things that people do with Flux resources. So for example, I can suspend this Helm release, stop it from syncing. I'm in my test user, so I'm not actually allowed to do it here, but I'd be able to suspend it and then resume it. So huge thanks to our contributors for bringing that support in. And the last one I want to show you is Source Hydrator. This one hasn't been merged yet, so this is working on my local branch. And I'm praying the demo gods don't get me. So the idea is it'll be Argo CD's first class support for the rendered manifest pattern. And it is done by just changing the source field to source hydrator. You specify a dry source, so the pre-rendered manifests. Indent these guys, and then you tell it where you want to sync from. So in this case, we're going to sync from target branch env/dev, and let's just keep the path as Helm guestbook. Save that out, and we shouldn't see anything immediately look different. That's a good thing because I've already run the source hydrator on this app, so it's been rendered out to my Argo CD example apps fork. But if I go in and make a change to Helm guestbook, I've got a values file that I can edit and bump the replica count to 2. If I commit this change out to the master branch and I refresh my app, you'll see that the source hydrator runs. I get a little pop-up that has to do with how I'm storing credentials, and the app goes out of sync. So far, nothing looks different from the way an app would normally look in Argo CD. But the interesting thing is that behind the scenes, what Argo actually did was rendered the manifest and then pushed the changes to the env/dev branch. And I can look here and see I've got some metadata. I've got a README that describes how to hydrate the manifest by running Helm template. So it just bumps the commit hash metadata file, a couple of them bumping the commit hash, and then the actual change. So this will be useful for all the reasons that the rendered manifest pipeline or pattern is useful. This will just make it a more first class component of Argo CD and make it easy to opt in. So those are the new things that are out and in the pipeline. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions, and I'll start. I see, Christian, you got your hand up. Let me check with Ryan real quick, and then I'll go to you. So any large noteworthy bug fixes in 2.12? Good question, Ryan. Generally, bug fixes get backported. So I'm not aware of any that it was like a bug fix that we were uncomfortable backporting. I do know in 2.13, there is what's effectively a bug. If you've got Argo CD managing a massive namespace with like 10,000, 100,000 resources in it, there's a resource tree construction algorithm in GitOps engine that's really, really slow for those big namespaces. And someone contributed a much faster algorithm. So it took their reconciliation times from like 2 minutes to under a second. So that'll be huge in 2.13. But as far as I know, nothing in 2.12. And folks can correct me if I missed anything. Cool. Christian.
Yeah, so for the hydrator, does the hydrator create one big YAML file or individual files? And if so, is that configurable in any way?
Good question. Right now, it creates one directory for each application that is using that branch as a destination. And in each directory, it has one big flat manifest.yaml. I can see the value in like breaking things down by group kind resource name. So far, I've been going with a flat file, but I think eventually we'll probably want to make that configurable. Cool. Anything else?
I just want to add, great job with the hydrator. It's a huge step forward. This pattern sounds really neat and useful.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Right now it's just a PR, so if anyone wants to test early, feel free to go find the PR and run a custom build. It's not super duper stable, but it basically functions, and it does have documentation. Cool. That's it for me.
Okay. All right, thanks, Michael. Let me check the meeting notes to see if anyone added anything to the agenda. Looks like not. Are there any topics anyone else wants to bring up before we end for today?
Yeah, I have one, and since Michael's here and he's gonna smirk because I bring this up every now and then. For the progressive syncs, is there like an issue, or is there a tracker, or is there something? Because right now it's an alpha, and I think it's been out long enough to where maybe we can move it maybe into a beta phase. And if not, like if there isn't a reason, is there like a list of issues like that we need to take care of before we move it forward? So yeah, that's my question. Is there any movement there? Is that something like like if there's no movement there, is like just something that I should just start doing like moving forward, or is there like a reason why it's just still hanging around in alpha?
I haven't monitored the issues super closely. I do know that there was a regression in 2.12 and then a bug fix. So there are people who are using it and who are fixing bugs, which to me would be the main prerequisite to moving it to beta. And I'm not aware of any sort of super big issues. I'd be comfortable moving it to beta. I think that in general, my preference for the direction of GitOps and sort of ordering of operations is to try to guide people toward a more sort of eventually consistent retry based way of resolving dependencies. So progressive syncs to me shouldn't be the first option that we direct folks to. But I do think that it has its place, and it's probably time to either move it to beta or consider, if we just think it's not used enough or not well maintained enough, to deprecate it. My leaning is to moving it to beta.
Eric had his hands raised.
Yeah, one thing we've been talking about internally with progressive sync indeed is that the daemon set support. So your platform teams will like to use it and roll things through iterations of tiered support, and with progressive sync it does not support daemon sets well because it's a infinitely syncing progressing state on the app. So I think that might be something to consider for reaching beta.
An infinitely progressing daemon set sounds like a daemon set health check bug. I can't think of a resource that should be okay.
So there is an open issue, and the current workaround is to add a custom Lua script to that, and it would be nice to move that from a global setting to the your application, so that you could say like, hey, if I reach 80% of healthy, then I consider my application progressed for my daemon set.
I think that that's possible in a way. The way I would do that is configure a global override health check and have that health check toggle its behavior based on the presence of an annotation or a label on the resource. Okay. So it wouldn't exactly be an application setting, but you could make sure that the application that contains the target daemon set, its manifests are modified to annotate or label that daemon set as having the 80% behavior. And I guess you could even make the Lua script configurable via an annotation, like minimum available replicas, whatever, equals 80%. And then the health check could respond to that setting.
Do we have any reservations with using Lua in general? Is that, I don't know where I thought I read it, but I thought that that was more considered a possible way to destabilize, or it wasn't really considered. My concern is if Argo updates and it breaks that, there's no unit testing or any kind of insurance that the contract is maintained.
Sure. I think it depends. If you've got a Lua script that's built into your like in your internal Argo CDCM, obviously if there's a bug in it, that's kind of in your realm, and you need your own testing to make sure there aren't problems there. If we felt that it was a Lua script change that could move upstream, then yes, we'd have testing and try to avoid regressions that way. But in general, I would avoid building things in such a way that a health check is such a critical component. Like Argo CD is doing its best to understand the status of an application and sort of file it into a bucket: healthy, degraded, suspended, progressing. But those are very rough buckets, and they don't really make sense for every resource or every organization. So just don't build things in a way that those have to be perfect, I think would be my advice.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, topics? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for attending today's meeting, and thanks Michael again for doing the rundown. And we'll see you again next month.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.